what? You did in your head. It's been there for so long.
Okay,
like
Peter.
that.
I'm going to agree with you just to end the.
He is a cutting crew pin. Trust him.
I do. Thank you. You
In
remember everything.
2005, they played in Guilford
Maybe you saw him in Guilford.
with
Maybe.
Daryl Hall and John Oates.
I saw him with Daryl Hall and John Oates.
Did you?
I did.
Where, in Manchester?
No, the Garden in Boston. Yeah, in Manchester. Down by the river.
We're going back to bed.
All right, Robbio, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Peter White.
Tune into Through the Stage Door. That's on tonight.
Yep, Broadway's Best Duets, Part 2.
All right, more show tunes, right?
Of course. And there will not be a title, just so you know, don't go to Podbean this week. Starting with next week's show, which starts Sunday, go online for the title list of songs.
Okay, Robbio. Well, thank you very much for being here. You're the best.
Thanks, Rob.
And Kyle Clayton, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yep.
We have Eric Lesniak coming in tomorrow from the Manchester Economic Development Office. And we'll wrap up your week. So that's going to do it.
It'll be a fun one.
Yeah, it's going to be all right. So stay cool today. Going to be kind of a carbon copy of yesterday. Keep it right here. You got Matt Connaughton Unleashed coming up at 4 p.m. Like I said, followed by Through the Stage Door. What else is on tonight? Granite State of Mind, brand new tonight, 9 o'clock. Have a great day, everybody.
What I'm saying is you're not a very good radio guy.
This hour on WMNH is sponsored by CGI Business Solutions, located at 5 Dartmouth Drive in Auburn. They serve all your business needs, including employee benefits planning, corporate design and business administration, investments and wealth management, and customized business insurance solutions. Their phone number is 866-841-4600 or on the web at cgibusinesssolutions.com.
Bring your kitchen to life with Queen City Cabinetry. Located at 87 Elm Street in the historic Sunbeam Mall in Manchester. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They can be reached at 603-222-2007 or on the web at queencitycabinetrynh.com. Come see the possibilities. Queen City Cabinetry, another proud sponsor of WMNH.
Come on down to the Hop Knot at 1000 Elm Street, Manchester's premier craft beer and gourmet pretzel bar. Tell us more, Trudy.
We make our dough fresh every day. We make a variety of styles of pretzels and serve craft beer, cocktails, and a few bottles of wine. We do the traditional pretzel, and we have multiple flavors for that. We also do stuffed pretzels, pretzel sandwiches, free dessert pretzels, and pretzel knots.
The Hop Knot in the Brady Sullivan Plaza at 1000 Elm Street.
Clemento's Pizzeria, family friendly, awesome for a date night. Clemento's Pizzeria. For delivery, call 603-782-8450. Clemento's Pizzeria, the best pizza in town. 1875 South Willow Street in Manchester, New Hampshire. Best cocktails around. Come in as friends and leave as family.
You are listening to WMNH-LP, Manchester's radio, broadcasting at 95.3 megahertz frequency modulation from the top of 1000 Elm Street. Our studios are located at 1045 Elm Street and licensed to Manchester Public Television Service in Manchester, New Hampshire, USA. Contact us by email at WMNH953@gmail.com or through our website at WMNHradio.org.
What program, what channel, what is designed by you?
It's a great song, but I don't know it.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Here we go. It is that time again. Matt Connerton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also on Kongpass 97 if you're in Manchester. And hello to all of our online listeners across the nation and around the globe. You can go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all of your live streaming options, social media links, contact info, show archives, etc., etc. Today is Thursday, July 13, 2023. So nice to have you all with me. By the way, played a couple songs there to open the show today. We started with Bleed Lines, the single from our friends in the band Sepsis. Part of why I played that is they've got a brand new video. And in fact, if you happen to be in Facebook in the chat room, Jenny shared the link. They've just released, actually, it went up last night on YouTube, the brand new video from Sepsis for the song Bleed Lines. It's really cool. Features the brand new lineup of the band, so I recommend checking that out. And I really like that song a lot, so I figured I'd play that today. And it's a good excuse to let everybody know about the new video. And, of course, I also played Don't Ya, a little bit of garage rock from our friend Grimrock, who joined us yesterday on the show for the world radio premiere of his new single, Don't Ya. He is from the great state of Pennsylvania, and he's, by the way, been doing a lot. If he's listening, thank you. He's been doing a lot to really kind of promote the show and his appearance on the show yesterday, and he's got a lot of people talking about it on Twitter, which is really cool. So we appreciate that very, very much. Tomorrow on the show, we've got a busy show tomorrow. We have, of course, Eric Pilcher's classic film review, and this week the subject is National Lampoon's Vacation, very appropriate, of course, for the summertime. And then at 5 p.m. tomorrow, we're going to be joined by Dave Wally. And this is kind of a special one for me because Dave and I went to high school together. And I've always had tremendous respect for him. Not only is he a great guy, but a very talented musician. And so he's got this band, Satellite Union, really, really good. So he's going to be Skyping in from Chicago. That's where Dave is, and that's where the band is based. I spent a lot of time in Chicago as a kid because when I was a wee lad, a young urchin, when my parents split up, my mom ended up moving back to Chicago where she was from originally. So every summer I would get to spend the summers out there with her. So I know that city pretty well myself, but I haven't been there in a while, I'll admit. But it'll be really cool to talk to Dave tomorrow and catch up with him. So that will be tomorrow on the show. In fact, I might even at the top of the hour today, I might give a little sneak preview of a Satellite Union song, not one of the ones that Dave sent me. I'm going to save those for tomorrow, but there's another Satellite Union song I found online, a video of a performance from 2022, and I said, ooh, I really like this. So Melanie says, were you a Crip or a Blood? No, not in Chicago. Melanie, you're thinking of back when I was in Compton, C-Town. I was actually a member of both the Crips and the Bloods, but, I was pretty thug. That was a different time, though. Boy, I'll tell you what, if you knew me back then, whew, you'd be afraid. You'd be afraid of me. Anyway, 603-250-6007 is a studio line, 603-250-6007. I'm never quite sure how to go with that. That's an old joke. I'm never quite sure how far to go with it. I don't go as far with it as I used to. It's different times. 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. I'm on social media at Matt Connerton. You can email me, matt@mattconnerton.com. And of course, you can interact and opine in the Facebook live chat. But Melanie's making me laugh in the chat room. But the best thing to do so that we can hear and enjoy your dulcet tones is to give us a call at 603-250-6007. Speaking of dulcet tones, we have a little bit of a mystery. Usually on Thursday afternoons, we are joined via phone by our friend Easy G for his entertainment report. However, I realized today that I haven't heard from him. And usually I hear from him in advance of his entertainment report because he typically has a song request that he would like me to play at the end of his entertainment report. It's usually something by either Amanda McCarthy, Katie Dobbins, or April Cushman, one of those three, because those are the three entertainers he speaks about during his entertainment report. It's really more of an Amanda McCarthy, Katie Dobbins, April Cushman report. To be very precise about it, but I realized today, and I was saying to Jenny earlier, I haven't heard from Easy G, so we'll see if he calls at 4:15. But I don't know, and I don't see him in the chat room either. So hopefully everything's okay. If we don't hear from him, he does have. I ran into Kyle Heavey earlier. Of course, Kyle, part of the WMNH family. He hosts his own show called Off the Mark Sports on Sundays from, I believe it's 10 a.m. to noon. But Kyle and I were talking earlier just briefly, and I said that Jenny's saying Eric Gagnon. Yes, Easy G, Eric Gagnon. I was saying, Easy has a little bit of a history of disappearing for months at a time. So I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see if we hear from him. But we'll go ahead and say hello to everybody in the Facebook live chat, and we do have something to get into. There's a particular news item that I think is being somewhat underreported, shall we say, that we're going to get into today. But yes, I did mention Melanie is in the chat room. And by the way, Melanie, I hope everything is good where you are. Also, JFed joins us in the chat as well and says, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, JFed. My thoughts are with the two of you. Of course, you are in Vermont, and Vermont, areas of Vermont. I mean, the pictures, I'd seen some that Melanie had posted on Facebook, and it's been in the news, of course, that the terrible torrential downpours of rain that left that area flooded. And to see the flooding in Montpelier is, I saw one news report that said it's actually worse than when Hurricane Irene had hit. So it's pretty bad there. So hope everything's okay. Hope you're both all right. It sounds like you are, but boy, hopefully that water recedes soon. And I did even hear something about another storm system is moving in. So our thoughts are with you there and everyone in the great state of Vermont. Jenny, of course, is in the chat room and says, shalom, peeps. And she did share a link, like I said, to the new video from Sepsis for the track Bleed Lines. Really great song. Eric Street joins us in the chat and says, I thought Kyle could be the new entertainment reporter since he sat at the desk the other day. Yes, Kyle Clayton of The Morning Show. It was great to see him. He hadn't been on the show in quite some time, but he came in the other day because we had the Trichomes here. And he's really close friends with Ian from the Trichomes. And it turns out they had been in a band together back in the day, which I meant to look up online. I wanted to find that band, and there might not be anything available anyway online, but I am super curious. But DJ Steve is in the Facebook live chat. Hello. DJ Steve, of course, joins us Friday nights for Retro Spectrum Radio with Paulie C. Every Friday night from 8 to 11 p.m. here on WMNH. I have the honor and privilege of being one of Paul's co-hosts on that show, along with DJ Steve and, of course, Mike from Queen City Cabinetry. Melanie says, yep, Governor is encouraging no one is on the roads after 4 p.m. today. Risk of flooding and extreme winds. It just doesn't stop, does it? I'm sorry to hear that, Melanie. N. Saturn, who is from, of course, Greensboro, North Carolina, says, we say good afternoon, hashtag Matt. Yesterday, hashtag Matt Connerton. We say that new force of the spark just comment to you yesterday. Alrighty. We are watching you from Greensboro, North Carolina. I suspected as much, I have to say. I did kind of assume that might be where you are watching us from. Oh, I do see Sepsis is in the Facebook live chat. Hello. Let me give the number again, and then we're going to get into something. It's obviously Easy G is not called, so I guess he's probably disappeared once again. Oh, Melanie says, I think a virgin or two should be thrown into a volcano. You never know. It could work. Yes, it could, but we don't know. Is there an active volcano available to do that? That would be my first question. Just, because we have to approach these things from a pragmatic and practical standpoint. Oh my God, I just thought of something. What if something happened with Easy G and Bruce? Maybe that's why I haven't heard from him. So let me give the studio line again, and then we'll get into. Rhonda Favero joins us in the Facebook live chat all the way from California. She says, "Cali in the house." 603-250-6007 is the number. 603-250-6007. That is the studio line. What I wanted to get into today, and this is one of those things that it's not that the media is ignoring it. Sometimes when people talk about things that aren't getting what they feel is a significant amount of attention in the mainstream media, they'll say, oh, the mainstream media is ignoring this story. You hear that a lot. And it's like, well, no, the mainstream media is not ignoring it. I knew about that. And the reason I knew about it is from the mainstream media. But this is a particular item that I think is being not covered enough. And I'm a bit alarmed by what is happening, and it involves foreign policy. Obviously, in the times that we live in, when we talk about foreign policy, the first thing that people think about and discuss is, of course, Russia and the invasion of Ukraine and NATO. And it's been a pretty big week on that front, of course. The announcement being made at the G7 that Ukraine will be joining NATO in the future. Not until after the current war is over. So we talk about that, and we talk about the decision by the Biden administration to give Ukraine cluster bombs to use, which is very controversial. They're taking a lot of criticism from that, to a large degree from his own party, Biden's own party, the Democrats. A lot of Democrats are criticizing him for it. I actually agree with the decision. I think it's necessary to do, but I understand it's, as we say, it's something upon which reasonable people can disagree. So there's been a lot of news lately, but there's something that is connected with all of this that is not getting talked about that much. So again, it is being reported on. For example, if you go onto the Google and you type in Cuba, Russia, China, you will, in fact, find search results on mainstream media outlets. Oh, hello to Dylan Reynolds, who joins us in the Facebook live chat. Speaking of great musicians. So you will find stories. The mainstream media is covering this. But again, at any given time, there's only so much oxygen. Yeah, because there's only so much time you have in a newscast and on these shows. And but you'll notice, again, I mentioned Russia, China, and Cuba. So we talk a lot about Russia these days, obviously, and we talk a lot about China. We're always talking a lot about China. We don't talk much about Cuba. Now, why is that? Well, just not much to say about Cuba, right? Well, here's the problem. Actually, there is. And this is the part that I think is being not discussed enough, what's happening right now with Cuba. And I'm pretty bothered, and I'm upset that this is happening, and I'm going to explain to you in some detail in a moment, but it's these current conditions were avoidable, and there's a significant amount of blame to go around, and the blame that I will be assigning today for the current situation, as I see it, will be bipartisan in nature. I can assure you of that. But the problem is, and if you saw my post on social media earlier, you might have an idea of where I'm going with this and why I'm thinking about Cuba. Two things. So China has been really cozying up to Cuba, and they seem to be developing quite a relationship. And China seems to be using Cuba to spy on the United States, or that seems to be their intention at least. Cuba, not too far. I don't remember offhand how many miles it is off of the coast of Florida, but, Cuba's not far. Not far at all. Strategically, if you are an enemy of the United States, and we have seen this in history, if you are an enemy of the United States, if you can somehow get yourself set up in Cuba, where you can do things like spy on the United States because of the close proximity of Cuba, where you can spy on the United States, well, you're in a pretty good position there. That's a good thing for you to have, right? Or if you're an enemy of the United States and you would like to, been a long time since we've used a phrase like this. But if you're an enemy of the United States and you would like to potentially be able to launch a first strike in a nuclear standoff on the United States, boy, having some missiles in Cuba would sure be to your advantage, wouldn't it? Khrushchev certainly thought so, and Khrushchev is long gone. But, well, we'll get to that. By the way, though, before I go any further, I don't want to alarm anybody. I'm not saying that they're actively putting nuclear weapons in Cuba to hit the United States. I'm not saying that. No. Just to be clear, no one is reporting that. Nothing like that. But I'm concerned because, so not only is Cuba getting very cozy with China, but we seem to have a rekindling of an old relationship, shall we say, with Cuba and Russia. And in fact, Russia just sent one of their Navy ships to Cuba, and Russia is helping them out with their oil situation. Apparently, Cuba needs oil. And so we seem to be seeing a great strengthening of that relationship, a re-strengthening of that relationship. That's a big problem. We'll get into more details, but just looking at it in a broad sense, we don't need our two greatest adversaries in the world, China and Russia, to be having a strategic relationship with Cuba, the island that is not far from the coast of Florida. This is a problem. And again, this is something that I think is going largely unnoticed. It's not that it's not being reported. Obviously, how did I know about it if it's not being reported? It is. But I think it's a bigger problem. I think it's a bigger danger than people might realize. And I'm a little bit frustrated that it's not getting more attention, because I would like to know what the Biden administration is doing about this. And I'm not getting any particular impression that they're doing much. Now, in terms of blame, I said the blame is bipartisan. Well, here it is. And we'll get into some more details about it, but just speaking about it broadly. So the Obama administration, and we'll go through the timeline in a moment, but just broad strokes to start. So the Obama administration really tried to sort of normalize relations and really sort of an outreach program with Cuba involving, in fact, not without a lot of controversy and criticism, but President Obama at the time actually going and visiting Cuba. When was that? Was that toward the end of his presidency? We'll look at the timeline, but actually there's some really cool pictures that came out of that. Actually, it was pretty amazing to see President Obama on the streets of Havana, or Havana, depending on how you say it. How does Urge Overkill say it in that song? They say Sister Havana. I think they say Havana. And I supported that. Again, I understood some of the criticism, but I supported it because I felt that strategically, again, we want to, doesn't mean we have to like them. And by them, I mean, I don't mean anything against the Cuban people. Not at all. Not whatsoever. But it doesn't mean we have to like Castro. Of course, Fidel Castro is dead and he was replaced by Raul Castro. And, people got very uneasy about images of Obama hanging out with Castro at a baseball game. And, these are things that really bothered some people. But I felt at the time, from a practical and a pragmatic standpoint, it made sense, and it was probably long overdue, to be honest with you. And I thought so because the Cuban Missile Crisis, even though it happened before I was even alive, which I'm really glad about, I would not have wanted to live through that because, well, we'll get to that. But I thought it made sense. Unfortunately, and here's where the blame starts. After Obama, Trump administration comes in. Predictably, they start trying to undo much of what Obama did. And, you know, historically, you see that. That's not that unusual, right? When a new president comes in who's a different party than the previous president, they try to undo a lot of things that the previous president did. So not surprising in that sense. But one of the things that the Trump administration immediately undid was most of the, if not all of the progress and goodwill and all of it that this new relationship that Obama had established with Cuba. Trump came in and they basically undid it all. So back to square one there. And then the Biden administration came in, and I remember at the time thinking, you know, hopefully they can reset things with Cuba. That would be wonderful, because I thought that what the Obama administration did was very positive. Nope. The Biden administration came in, and they did actually try to reinstate some of the Obama era policy, but I'd say overall a pretty meek and meager attempt at it. I understand coming in, they had their hands full with the pandemic and this and that, but, you know, I would kind of think that once Russia started indicating that they were about to, because it wasn't a huge shock when they invaded Ukraine, it was looking like it was going to happen months before it did. You know, you would think it might occur to somebody, hey, Russia's really getting out of control here. Maybe we need to make sure that things are stable with Cuba so that the Russians don't try to rekindle that relationship with Cuba, because it seems like we're about to be at odds with Russia. But no, the Biden administration didn't do a whole hell of a lot in terms of that. So there's plenty of blame to go around. And some of you might think, Matt, is this really a big deal? Why are you so concerned about Cuba? You're overreacting. It's not really a priority. Well, you know, if you know anything about the Cuban Missile Crisis, some people thought that too back in during the JFK administration. Nobody cares about Cuba. What do we care about Cuba? Yeah, nobody cared about Cuba until there were images, aerial photography of the Russians installing nuclear weapons on the island of Cuba. And all of a sudden, everybody cared a whole hell of a lot about Cuba. Now, part of why I might be a little extra sensitive to this is, so I wasn't alive when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. And again, I'm very glad for that, because that would have been something frightening to live through. I especially probably would not have handled it particularly well. Oh, hello to Miriam Banish in the chat room. I would have been pretty freaked out, because I growing up in the 80s, you know, I grew up with obsession is too strong a word, but an unhealthy preoccupation, shall we say, with the threat of nuclear war. I was very worried, and I did let it, I expended a lot of mental energy on it, on worrying about it. Some of that is human nature. We all tend to worry to varying degrees about things that we can't control. That was my big thing growing up. And my dad, who, you know, he listens to the show, I mean, he can attest to that. I remember having conversations with him about it, with my mother about it, with my stepmother about it. It was something that was on my mind a lot more than it should have been. This may be part of why I was so, I've always been so fascinated by you know, obviously I love history, but if you were to ask me, is there a particular aspect of history that I'm, you know, sort of, that I find more interesting than any others? You know, anything Cold War related is really interesting to me. I'm fascinated by anything related to the Cold War. And if I were to pick a particular point during the Cold War that I'm especially fascinated by, it's the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'll read any book, watch any documentary, you know, whatever it is about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Just absolutely a fascinating moment in history to me. And thank God JFK was there to get us through that, and he had some really good people around him. He also had some people who maybe didn't have the best judgment, but fortunately their voices were not ultimately the ones that JFK chose to listen to. That's why you might have heard me say it on the show. Whenever I hear somebody start talking about, oh, we need to be doing so much more and we need to get NATO right in there and confront Russia directly and we need to send in American troops and push Russia out. You know, I hear people say some things that I think sound completely irrational and insane and potentially self-destructive and Armageddon-inducing. I'll often refer to that as Curtis LeMay syndrome. And if you know anything about the Cuban Missile Crisis and you know who General Curtis LeMay was, he was probably the number one guy who was in Kennedy's ear telling him, hey, look, let's just do this. Let's just go and start bombing. We got to bomb Cuba. We got to take out those missiles. Let's just do it now. We're not going to, we shouldn't be waiting for them to, you know, we shouldn't be doing all this back channel negotiation and whatnot. We should just go in and let's hit them. And Kennedy said, well, if we do that, how are they going to respond? And by the way, Dean Acheson said at the time, well, what they will probably do is they will probably confront us in Germany. And then it just escalates from there. The point being, it would ultimately escalate in a nuclear exchange, and that would be it. None of us would be sitting here. So, but yeah, you know, General LeMay was, you know, and I'm sure he was a good man, but he was like, yeah, let's just, because he told Kennedy he doesn't think that they will respond. Because if they respond, then things will escalate and we know where it ends up. So, but he was just itching. LeMay was itching to go in. And thank God Kennedy was, you know, and Bob McNamara, too, who, of course, is takes an incredible criticism for his role in the Vietnam War, criticism that I think is warranted. And if you've, there's a great documentary about McNamara called Fog of War, where he's interviewed throughout the documentary, and it's really good and really compelling. You should see it if you haven't. I highly recommend it. But McNamara was one of the cooler heads, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, who helped get us through that. So McNamara deserves credit, too. For his role there, not for his role in Vietnam, however, in my view. That's my opinion. But we obviously were caught off guard by what was happening in Cuba and the fact that those missiles were being put in. And you know, JFK and his administration got us through that. But a lesson that obviously some people did learn from it, because we've been warned about this over the decades. We've been warned about this by some people who've said, you know, we might want to do something about strengthening our relationship with Cuba, even though Fidel Castro, and again, he died and then was replaced by Raul Castro. And even though Castro is a bad guy, and we don't ever want to look like we're, from a human rights perspective, we don't ever want to look like we're approving of anything going on there. But you know, we have an embassy there, obviously, but we might want to be making a little extra effort to keep things very copacetic with Cuba, because if we don't, someone else may come in. The Russians may come back, or China might come in and fill that void that we're not filling, and we're not showing any interest or inclination to ever not compromise, but in terms of lifting some trade restrictions or whatever it may be, maybe some sort of an olive branch needs to be extended to keep history from repeating itself, as history often will. And I'm worried that that's where we're ending up now. Chris Poirier, also known as Crispy, a comedian, he says, we need to stop the posturing by Russia and China. And if Trump was still in, he just would have handed us over, and still might if Trumps are elected. Oh, do you mean Ukraine, handing Ukraine over? Well, Trump has said that he could have that solved within 24 hours. But the problem is, we all know what that means. Well, how would you possibly just have that solved in 24 hours? There's only one way you could do it. You could tell Putin you can have it, and that's it. Trump was never a fan of NATO to begin with, which means if he gets elected in 2024, he might then have to deal with the reality that Ukraine is at that point now a part of NATO, if the war is even over by then, which I'm actually skeptical that it will be. I think it's going to drag on potentially for years. I really do. I don't see any evidence to the contrary, but that's me. Melanie says, I have a preoccupation with the dead rising since watching Night of the Living Dead in the third grade. Yes, I can understand that. You know what film I did see when I was a kid was not in the third grade, certainly, but I was pretty young, actually. The day after. And I remember a conversation. My dad probably will remember this too. A conversation with him and my stepmother about whether or not to let me watch it. But I'd say it's a good film, but it's weird to say it's a good film considering what the subject matter is. I mean, it's frightening, but I don't think it did any harm seeing it because I was already so preoccupied with nuclear war. I don't think it made me any more afraid. Certainly didn't make me any less afraid either. I think it was a wash. And Saturn says in the chat room, Trump, 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 we say. Melanie says, true story. I've always mapped out at least 2 escape routes to escape zombies everywhere I have ever lived. Well, that's very, that's like survivalism, except instead of planning to go into an underground bunker, you plan to escape you plan your escape from zombies. And Saturn says, Trump just got something going on. We say, we ain't going to like it, we said. All right. Melanie says, my therapist says I'm doing much better. I'm just kidding. She doesn't say that. Rhonda Favero says, the day after gave me nightmares. Yeah, see, in my case, I was already having those nightmares, so I don't think it much mattered. But so the point is, the broad point is, and then we'll get into some of the details on what is happening right now with Cuba. This is being overlooked to a large degree, and I'm very concerned. Let's look at China first. We've got a couple things on this. Oh, you know what? This is from thehill.com. Now, this is an opinion piece written by Arturo McFields, who writes he writes a national security column, an opinion column for The Hill. Let's see what he has to say about this. For the last 64 years, the Cuban dictatorship has been one of the main threats to democracy in Latin America and to the security of the U.S. Since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, following the Russian spy base established in Lourdes, the Bajucal, I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly, facility, and finally with the 2019 chapter involving Chinese espionage, Havana's regime has continued to open its doors to America's most dangerous geopolitical enemies. In 1960, Cuba became the first country in Latin America to establish diplomatic relations with Communist China. Since then, political, military, and economic exchanges have been increasing, particularly since the fall of the Soviet Union. Last November, China approved $100 million to rescue Cuba from its self-inflicted economic collapse. By the way, I didn't even realize that. That totally got past me. I did not know that. I knew that Cuba had a diplomatic relationship with China going back to the 60s. I did not realize this, though, about the $100 million rescue package that China had approved for Cuba. That completely got past me. Oh, hello to Greg Joseph in the Facebook live chat. He says, sending love and respect for the work you are doing, educating the people. Thanks a million. Thank you. Yes. Greg Joseph, of course, from Clemento's, another one of our great sponsors here at WMNH 95.3. And he's a frequent contributor on the morning show as well. I love hearing Greg on the morning show. He's got kind of a understated sense of humor that I find very funny. Says here, last November, okay, so we covered that. Okay, so although Havana and Beijing have maintained a spy base since 2019, and by the way, I didn't know that either. I didn't realize that either. I thought that was a more recent development, but it's not. Intelligence cooperation between the two countries has continued above and beyond that. According to the Wall Street Journal, the two regimes are negotiating the establishment of a joint military training base on the island just 100 miles away from the Florida coast. Yeah, that's not good. That's really not good. The U.S. has also reported the activities of the Chinese telecommunications giants Huawei and ZTE in the same area where the spy base is supposed to be located. This century, the Castro dictatorship and its progeny have helped forge and maintain the current dictatorships of Venezuela and Nicaragua, both politically and militarily. Cuban advisors are present in these two countries to pull the strings, offering intelligence support and training to their to their police and armies. Cuba also maintains a close political and ideological relationship with leftist presidents in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. Brazil and Mexico have supported the Cuban medical brigades, considered a model of modern slavery. According to the human rights organization Prisoners Defenders, the regime keeps 94% of the salaries received by 50,000 doctors in different parts of the world. Yeah, I've read some about that. We have a... Oh, thought we had a call. Do we have a call? Nope. They hung up. Yeah, I've read some about that. And by the way, it's things like that that I understand make it difficult for us to extend that olive branch. I understand that. But I just wish if I could turn back time, to quote Cher, that we could have at least maintained that sort of normalization of a relationship that the Obama administration had established. Because I cannot help but wonder, had that not continued, even if it didn't necessarily progress, but just continued, maybe, just maybe, in the year 2023, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about the Chinese having a military base on an island 100 miles off the coast of Florida. Maybe. It says here, since the early days of the Cuban Revolution and the missile crisis, Russia has been the main military partner of Cuba's regime. Last week, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu met with his Cuban counterpart, Alvaro Lopez Miera. After the abortive rebellion by Wagner mercenaries in Russia, Putin has reportedly looked to Cuba for more soldiers to continue his war of aggression against Ukraine. According to Prisoners Defenders, Russia and Cuba have reached an agreement that would send Cuban soldiers to Ukraine, paying each of them $2,000 per month. But the island's dictatorship would naturally keep between 75% to 95% of their income, since this is how dictatorships work. While China advances its commercial relationships in Latin America, seizing key industries such as lithium, copper, and telecommunications, Cuba has an extensive political and ideological network throughout Latin America and even in the U.S. through the Sao Paulo Forum and the so-called Solidarity Networks. Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, and Congressman Michael McCaul, Republican of Texas, are calling on the Biden administration to give a classified briefing regarding the reported Chinese spy facility in Cuba. Okay, well, thank you, Senator Bob Menendez and Congressman Michael McCaul. I'm glad that somebody in the government is paying attention. And I would support them in that. I would hope that the Biden administration will give them that briefing. Given the political, economic, and security threat posed by Cuba and China, a comprehensive response is urgently needed. Partnerships with other democratic nations in Latin America should be strengthened, both in the field of security and in commercial matters. It would be a very big mistake to neglect such hemispheric threats or underestimate the dangerous strategies of such regimes as Cuba, China, and Russia. So that's the opinion piece on the Hill. And let's also look at this. Let's continue on the China portion of this, and we'll get to the Russian part probably in the second hour. This is a big topic, obviously, so we will continue. Actually, no, I think change of plans. All right, let's look at this. We'll go ahead and get to the Russia part here. This is from the Havana Times. This is from right out of Cuba. Right out of Cuba media here. It's an article titled Relaunching Relations Between Cuba and Russia. Just that phrase gives me a chill. Let's see. Cuba and Russia have announced plans to strengthen their economic and trade relations, but experts doubt that they can achieve a new bilateral golden age, and they glimpse geopolitical interests in difficult times for both countries. This week, the Cuban Prime Minister, Manuel Marrero, is in Russia for the Eurasian Intergovernmental Council and the International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, while the opposition warns of a new Russification, quote unquote. The visit, the last after those of several ministers and President Miguel Diaz-Canel himself last November, comes shortly after Havana announced preferential treatment for Russian investors, from transfers of agricultural land for 30 years to tax exemptions. These measures complete a flood of announcements, including the entry of 3 Russian ruble banks on the island and the presentation of a package of reforms. This kind of gets in the weeds a little more than I want to. You know what? I never liked the Havana Times anyway. I'm kidding. I've never had any opinion. I do want to look at the timeline, though, and then probably in the second hour we'll get more into the Russia part of this with the Russians now supplying oil to Cuba. But there's this is from CFR.org, Council on Foreign Relations, CFR.org. It's a timeline of U.S.-Cuba relations, and it's pretty informative. But where I want to actually pick this up is 2011 to 2013, and we'll go forward from there, because I want to look at, again, well, we could go back. We actually could go back to 1962. Maybe we should, actually. No, you know what? We should go back to 19... Let's go back to 1960. Growing antagonism between the United States and Russia. The United States and Cuba. Just we'll kind of speed through part of this, but I want to get to, because ultimately where I want to end up is when, we had an opportunity to really kind of improve things long term, and then we didn't, but we have a call. Hi, welcome to Matt Connerton Unleashed. Who's this?
Oh, ni hao ma, Matt. Oh, 我是 Ridley, 谈说我是tushija.
Is that Cantonese? What is that?
Oh, that's Mandarin. I was just saying, I'm Ridley, but I'm a beginner.
Ridley, yes, I'm sorry, Dave Ridley. I often, this is a failing of mine. I often get Cantonese and Mandarin confused.
Yeah, I don't really know much of anything about Cantonese. In fact, I don't really understand. Whenever you search, if you want to say, what happens is when you try to figure out what you're speaking or what you're listening to, it will tell you that you're speaking Chinese or you're listening to Chinese, and then it calls it Chinese simplified and Chinese traditional. I know that Chinese traditional is Mandarin, but I don't know what the difference is between Cantonese and Chinese simplified. Do you?
I actually do know, but it's just too much to get into here.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
I was just
going to say,
I have no idea.
Cold War 2.0. I don't know how to say that in Mandarin.
I have no idea. Yes. Yes. Go ahead, Dave. I am curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, yeah. So this is really tough. From a pro-freedom standpoint. If you look at the history of the first Cold War, the United States was more of a pro-freedom place than the Soviet Union was. But in fighting the Soviet Union, it eviscerated some of its own freedoms, and we haven't gotten those back yet. In addition, obviously, it committed a lot of abuses in beating the Soviet Union. Does that make sense?
Say it again, Dave. I'm not sure I quite followed all of it. I definitely got part of it, but yeah, say it again if you would.
I guess what I'm trying to say is what's happened before is what will happen again. The U.S. will be more pro-freedom than China, but it will lose some of its freedoms in fighting China. Does that make sense?
The U.S. will lose some of our freedoms in fighting China?
Yeah, just the way we lost some of our freedoms in fighting the Nazis and then fighting the Soviets, and we never get them back.
Can you expand on that? Because I'm actually not sure exactly what you mean.
Well, I hope I'm not starting to drift off topic here, but just, for example, the reason we have income tax withholding is because they started withholding income taxes to pay for World War II.
Oh, okay.
And it was a temporary wartime measure that's been in effect since, I think, 1942. So we can expect that kind of thing to happen again in fighting this actual legitimate threat from China. They're gonna use that as an excuse to take our freedoms away here.
But do you think that some people think it's inevitable? I actually don't. Call me an optimist. I think there are a lot of reasons to believe that it's actually not inevitable, war with China. But do you think that it is? Because you sound like you're pretty concerned.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cold War is inevitable, and we're already in one.
Yes.
But there are solutions. There are all kinds of solutions that don't cost taxpayers a dime, and the government wants to cover those up. They don't want anyone talking about it, and no one does talk about it, it seems like. And the obvious one is just to let us defend ourselves. They've got the American people so twisted into knots over what guns they can even own, and all the permissions they have to get to own a gun or to carry a gun, and so for some, that just all needs to go away, and then we don't have to worry about having this expensive, federally funded, centralized defense.
So you're not interested in. So I assume you're not interested in defending Taiwan if it comes to that.
Well, anyone who wants to help defend Taiwan should have the full moral support of the federal government. I think that should probably be encouraged. But it's not right to steal from taxpayers to send the money off to Taiwan. It's not right for the federal government to centralize the process of defending Taiwan. It's something to be done by individuals, companies, organizations, militias, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying, but that's never going to be the reality of how any of this works. So,
well, not as long as the federal government is monopolizing defense.
Right, which is what I mean by that's not ever going to be the reality of how any of this works, because that's never going to change.
It's the reality of how it works in Switzerland.
But this ain't Switzerland, and it's never going to be.
Well, again, that's the whole point, and that's why we have these problems, right? Switzerland is not having these problems with China. And by the way, neither is Costa Rica, which has no military at all, and no allies.
But when you say our problems with China, what do you mean exactly? Because when I think of problems with China, I think about things like they steal our intellectual property, they spy on us, I mean, what do you mean by problems with China?
Well, I'm more concerned about their interference with free speech in America, which it's not very intense yet, but there have definitely been some high-profile cases where they've interfered with people's ability to speak against their government, even though they're like Anglo-Americans living in America or African-Americans living in America. They have nothing to do with China except opening and closing their mouths in criticism of its government.
Are you talking about those? Well, give me an example.
Well, wasn't there an NBA guy who made some pro-Taiwan statement or maybe pro-Hong Kong statement or something? He was forced to retract it.
Right. I somewhat remember that. Yes.
Yeah, and there was also, I think, there's an NBA official who was forced to do that. I think there was also a player. And there was also that example of there was a student in Australia who just led this really minor, like 12-person sine wave in support of Hong Kong or something like that at his university. Mm-hmm. And he was such a small event and such an unimportant thing. I don't even think he was on time to his own protest. Right? It was just almost a non-event.
Yeah. And
suddenly, out of the blue, these goons show up and start beating up the protesters, like the 12.5 20-year-olds holding little signs. And it turned out the Beijing embassy got involved, and the university ejected the young man who organized the sine wave instead of coming after the people who beat him up for no particular reason. This is all videotaped. Mm-hmm. They ejected the student because the university was bought and paid for essentially by the Chinese government, and so that's just an example of how free speech is interfered with closer to China, and they're expanding their interference with free speech to the U.S.
I do remember you talking about that story with the protester and getting beaten up, and pretty wild. Well, I mean, the reality is that there's a larger reality, and this is part of why I don't think war is inevitable, particularly. But we are so economically interlocked with China. I think probably more than a lot of people realize. So it's not like our relationship with Russia, for example, where we can just say, well, screw you, we don't want your oil. We being NATO, I guess. But with China, it's very, very complicated, and we're very economically dependent on each other. And the Chinese are much more economically dependent on the United States, and I think people realize too. Some people, I heard one analyst saying that people think of China as like the U.S. is 6 feet tall and China's like 10 feet tall, and it's really the other way around. But So I don't know what the solution is. They're always going to have influence here. Dave, are you the one who originally brought up the Chinese police stations operating in the United States? Was that you?
They're not. Well, the ones I was talking about are not police stations.
Oh,
I was talking about the Confucius centers.
That's right, the Confucius centers. Okay, it was my dad who brought up the police stations. Yeah, that really shocked me. But so what's the answer, Dave? If realistically, now I understand what you would like to happen, but realistically, knowing that we are economically interdependent and knowing that the situation is what it is in terms of the federal government controlling defense, what do you think should happen?
Well, the realistic thing to hope for is that the United States government does not make any new steps to limit gun rights. Right. So just making sure that Americans maintain at least what rights they still have in terms of the ability to defend themselves. That would probably be the realistic thing to hope for.
Well, that's not going to change. I mean, we're not going to continue. We're not going to not have gun rights. Certainly, even if they are somewhat more regulated. But I don't think that has any effect on our foreign policy with China. I mean, it doesn't.
Well, it should. The gun rights are a key element of any sort of domestic defense.
Domestic.
Again,
yes.
This is the reason why Ukraine was invaded, was because they didn't. Was a key reason. I think it was the deciding factor. It was that there were not enough guns in the hands of civilians. Seven guns per 100 civilians.
Yeah.
In New Hampshire, it's 120 guns per 100 civilians. You can't imagine that doesn't have a big impact on the decision of anyone to invade.
I understand, Dave. I think we might have been talking about two different things because I'm not talking about invasion. I'm talking about a war with China, but I'm not talking about China trying to invade the United States. I can't imagine any circumstance under which that would happen. That would be. I understand they're long-term planners. They've got 50-year plans and 100-year plans and whatnot, but I don't think they're planning to invade the U.S. I'm not. When I talk. Yeah, go ahead.
That's the reason. That's a key reason why they're not planning on invading the United States. They would be able to do something like that there'd be certain circumstances where they could if the United States people didn't have gun freedom. Does that make sense?
I disagree with you there. I mean, I'm pro 2A and I support gun freedom, but we've got quite the nuclear arsenal. So even if we were to do something like what Australia did and confiscate guns, we've still got a whole lot of nukes. I don't think China would be. I don't think anyone would be interested in invading the United States. I think if we were to get into some sort of a war with China, it would be over Taiwan. It wouldn't be the Chinese coming to American soil.
Yeah, but just bear in mind how much it frees up the U.S. military for individuals in the United States that we've kind of got their back here, right? Like the United States military could send all the U.S. military out of the United States if they wanted to. Every last soldier could be sent away from the United States, and it would still be able to defend itself because of the gun freedom and the large number of firearms. Does that make sense? That
does. No, I understand what you're saying logically. Mike from Queen City Cabinetry points out in the chat room they would be too tired to fight from swimming all that way. That's a good point. I don't know how many boats they have. I know they've got a huge army because, it's a lot of... they don't have... I think India now has the largest global population, if I'm not mistaken. I think China's second. Is that correct? Do you know, Dave?
Actually, I don't know if India has surpassed them yet.
I think India has, but I could be wrong. Okay, now what about Cuba? Any thoughts there?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what should be done. Just as long as it's not an act of aggression, go for it. Anything that's not an act of aggression is fine to do against this Chinese base or against the government of Cuba or anyone else. But the problem is if the federal government is taking action against some base in Cuba using your tax dollars, that's an act of aggression against you.
Yeah, well, I know you and I see that differently, both in a broader sense, and I would say more specifically, if something is being done using my tax dollars and to protect me, and you might say, well, how is it the government's job to decide for me what is it or is not in the best interests in terms of my protection? I understand, but I guess what I'm thinking about and what I've been talking about today really is I just wish that that this wasn't even on the table in terms of China potentially having, I mean, I guess it hasn't happened yet, but potentially even having a base in Cuba, because I wish that we had continued the Obama administration policy with Cuba, where we were kind of trying to normalize relations and get things to a more positive place where someone like China or Russia would not come in and kind of fill that vacuum. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, but again, it's also important to keep things in perspective. Look how many military bases. Well, I don't know what. You tell me, what is the number of military bases that the United States has within 100 miles of China? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that number is.
I don't either. But
the U.S. has 800 military bases overseas, and it's constantly putting military bases right next to countries that it's hostile towards. Right? There's that saying, you know, obviously Iran is the aggressor because look how close they put their country to our 800 military bases, right?
I understand your point, Dave. I do. But again, I think back to, I don't know how much of the show you heard earlier, but I talked a lot about the Cuban Missile Crisis earlier. And when you're talking about when we're talking about a Chinese base 100 miles off the coast of Florida, I get very, very concerned. And I just feel...
Yeah, and that's how China looks at Taiwan. They say that's the American military base, you know, about 90 miles off the coast of mainland China.
We don't have an actual base on Taiwan, do we?
Well, not a big one, I don't think. There's U.S. troops there, but I don't think there's a de facto, like, official U.S. military. There's not an official U.S. military base on the island, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I didn't think so. That would be because I don't think the Chinese would tolerate that. I think if we tried to put an actual military base on Taiwan, I do think it would be that would be akin to actually them putting a military base on Cuba. But I'm very worried about this.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, but I'm very worried about this. Go ahead.
Well, again, that's the other solution is for the Taiwanese government to stop taking its people's guns. And the situation in Taiwan is much worse than the one in Ukraine was before the invasion. In terms of gun freedom, you know, Ukrainians had 7 guns per 100 civilians, and Taiwan has officially 0 guns in the hands of civilians per 100 civilians. So their government has brought their bad defense on itself, their lack of defense on itself.
I see. Yeah, I didn't know that about Taiwan. It doesn't surprise me, but I didn't know that what the policy there was. And obviously, they do have a Taiwanese military, but it would be no match for for China. That's for sure. If they do ever decide to move on Taiwan, well, what do you think about that? Do you think that's inevitable that the Chinese decide? I know Xi Jinping has said it will happen, but he never says when. And again, I remain cautiously optimistic that it won't. But what do you think? Do you think it's inevitable?
No, I don't think it's inevitable. The Chinese they're sort of reverting to totalitarianism now. So that's going to start damning their economy and shutting down the progress that they made, and so they will start probably eventually. This move will catch up with them, and it'll start affecting their technological lead wherever they have one. Because you can't be totalitarian and have a decisive technological lead. You can't maintain that. I think it's going to start eroding. I'm not sure, but that's what I hope will happen.
Their economy is pretty fragile as it is. They've did a horrendous job, as we all know, managing COVID, and they're in a lot of economic trouble right now. By the way, and I hope you'll take this as a compliment, Dave. Rhonda Favero in the chat room says the guy on the phone sounds exactly like the back in the day talk show host Dick Cavett, and I never noticed it before until Rhonda pointed it out. But you do sound like Dick Cavett.
Oh, great!
You know Dick Cavett, right?
Well, I saw just a couple episodes, but I'm not very familiar with him.
My dad used to watch Dick Cavett when I was a kid. He would watch him every night, and yeah, I like Dick Cavett. But you do sound like him. You do have a very similar voice. You speak a little bit faster than he does. Dick Cavett kind of speaks a little more slowly, but your actual voice is very very close. Well, Dave, we're well past the top of the hour, so we should let you go, and we've got to get to a break. Did you have anything to add?
No, thanks.
Okay. Oh, by the way, Pork Fest, that's already come and gone, right?
Yeah, I should just call in separately about all the Pork Fest news.
Well, now I'm curious. Did anything, because when you had called before, you said there was some controversy about involving a couple of the speakers, like RFK didn't want any guns in the room, and some other guy was threatening to cause a problem if there were trans people or something. Did anything happen?
The RFK thing went smoothly. Carla Garrick, the president of the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, or the former president of it, was able to heckle him a little bit or something. And she jumped up and asked him a question about New Hampshire declaring independence and whether he would fight us militarily if we did that.
Right.
And he answered kind of evasively. I guess he said that he wants to bring people together.
Right. Right.
And the other thing that happened with regard to the guy that was making threats against, like he said, if anyone tries to do a drag queen story hour, I'm going to come get him, or something.
Yeah.
It sounded like he was going to physically do something to them.
Yeah.
So this resulted in someone having like a trans story hour or whatnot. But the guy who was making the threats, like this big speaker who was going to come in and like a paid speaker, I guess he just never showed up.
Oh.
And I think he was like arrested the week before the Pork Fest or something like that.
Really?
And I think it was an unrelated arrest. He was at an event or something like that. So I think he was in jail or something when Pork Fest happened, or that's my understanding. So that's pretty dramatic, and there's other stuff that happened, but I should just call in separately and list it all.
Yeah, I am very curious to hear about it. So please, call back soon about that. But do you know the identity of the person yet, or no?
I feel like it's something like I never can say it correctly, but I'm just afraid I'll say the wrong name and implicate the wrong person.
Yeah.
I have it in my head, but I'm just afraid to say it.
Is it a long name? It's not Vivek.
No, it's like a 2-syllable thing. I keep meaning to know that before I call you and keep forgetting to look it up.
I'm just super curious. I tried to find out myself.
Yeah.
I looked online and I couldn't figure it out, but I'm just very, very curious. Well, all right, Dave, did you want to plug anything, Ridley Report or an NH Exit or anything before you go?
I've taken enough of your time.
All right, Dave. Well, I do enjoy talking with you, and I appreciate the call.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, you got it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that is Dave Ridley from the Ridley Report and NH Exit. We will, let's do this because, yes, we are late for actually, we have another call. Let's see. It looks like our friend Ron is on the line, so we always have time for Ron. Hey, Ron.
Hi, Matt. I'll try to be brief. I've got kind of questions and things that I can, take the answers off the air. I'm sure I was misinterpreting what Dave was getting at with arming the civilians. Wars are just fought conventionally, not by, handguns in backyards. But I think that would only cause, and I think he knows that it would only cause more harm than good even if every family had guns, it would just cause more harm than good.
No, he doesn't.
But that's neither
know
here nor
that.
there. What I wanted to ask, though, is with Cuba setting up, with China setting up a base in, how am I messing this up? Only 100 miles from the U.S., what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really matter? Because the United States has more nuclear vessels than anybody else, and like larger quantities of nuclear vessels.
Yeah.
So we kind of already have a base at sea, anywhere, anytime, between the carriers and the fighters and all of the above. So I don't know. Does 100 miles away really matter? Because, well, what does that matter? You could get a plane in the air to kind of shoot down anything kind of rapidly from. If they're only 100 miles away, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying is we don't need to have a base that close because our bases are all over the seas between the submarines and everything else.
Right.
So, and the last thing I wanted to say wasn't even a comment. I wanted to ask. I hear all these countries, where this one's a religious war and this one, and this one, and this one. Where does Japan fall in all of this? I haven't heard much about Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, does this... is that a dumb question?
No, not at all. There was something about Japan recently, actually. I forget what it was now, though. I might look that up during the break. There was something... I mean, we don't hear a lot about Japan. They don't go to war with anybody. They do have nuclear weapons, but we don't hear a lot about Japan. But there was something recently, foreign policy related, that was important regarding Japan. And I can't remember what it is, but I will look it up, Ron. I'm glad you asked about that because it was something.
Okay, and last but not least,
yes,
the sanctions that got imposed, do they affect, let's just say, use Japan? Are any of the sanctions that we've imposed on these other places, does that affect Japan's ability to get products and manufacture and create? I mean, I don't know. The sanctions seem like they were doing good, but I don't hear anything about it anymore.
Sanctions on who?
Oh my God, I'm nervous. Now you got me on the spot.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, when Trump was in place, sanctions were put in place against. I'm throwing a blank. If I wasn't on the brush, I could tell you. I don't know. It just seems like sanctions were imposed everywhere, and it was affecting everybody. Have we been listening to sanctions under Obama?
Oh, do you mean
under Biden?
Do you mean the tariffs that were imposed on China? Because Trump was very big on having a trade war with China, and we.
Thank you.
Yes. Not sanctions, but tariffs. And some of those, I think a few of those have been rolled back under Biden, but most of those have remained in place, from what I understand, which actually surprises me a little bit. I thought more of those would have been rolled back, but maybe because things are so tense with China, they're leaving them in place. But yeah, there were those tariffs that Trump did put a lot of tariffs on China.
All right, Matt. I'm really loving your show. I wish you could run it till 8 o'clock tonight. I just eat this stuff up.
Me too. But thank you, Ron. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate the call.
All right, buddy.
All right, Ron. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, that was our friend Ron. Let's get to a break, but Ron did ask a couple of very interesting questions that we'll address on the other side, but we'll get to a break. I'm going to play a track from... Where did it go? Oh, here it is. I'm going to play this song. So tomorrow on the show, I'm very excited because in the second hour, we're going to talk to my old friend from high school, Dave Wally. And he's got this band, Satellite Union. And we're going to play, this is a performance, live performance of that I found on the website for his band, Satellite Union. And the website is satelliteunionmusic.com. Dave sent me some specific tracks to play, but I'm going to save those for tomorrow. But I found this, and I really like it. The name of the song is If You Don't Go. And this is really, really cool. So we're going to play this, and we're going to show some love to our amazing sponsors. And then we will be back with the balance of our program today. And we'll answer those questions, those other questions that Ron had. And and we'll get into and we'll circle back to the topic at hand regarding Cuba and so forth. So plenty more to come. But here it is. This is If You Don't Go. This is from Satellite Union.
When
kitchen to life with Queen City Cabinetry, located at 87 Elm Street in the historic Sunbeam Mall in Manchester. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They can be reached at 603-222-2007 or on the web at queencitycabinetrynh.com. Come see the possibilities. Queen City Cabinetry, another proud sponsor of WMNH.
Come on down to the Hop Knot at 1000 Elm Street, Manchester's premier craft beer and gourmet pretzel bar. Tell us more, Trudy.
We make our dough fresh every day. We make a variety of styles of pretzels and serve craft beer, cocktails, and a few bottles of wine. We do the traditional pretzel, and we have multiple flavors for that. We also do stuffed pretzels, pretzel sandwiches, 3 dessert pretzels, and pretzel knots.
The Hop Knot in the Brady Sullivan Plaza at 1000 Elm Street.
Clemento's Pizzeria, family friendly, awesome for a date night. Clemento's Pizzeria. For delivery, call 603-782-8450. Clemento's Pizzeria, the best pizza in town. 1875 South Willow Street in Manchester, New Hampshire. Best cocktails around. Come in as friends and leave as family.
This hour on WMNH is sponsored by CGI Business Solutions, located at 5 Dartmouth Drive in Auburn. They serve all your business needs, including employee benefits planning, corporate design and business administration, investments and wealth management, and customized business insurance solutions. Their phone number is 866-841-4600 or on the web at cgibusinesssolutions.com.
WMNH, rip the knob off.
Welcome back, everybody, as we cruise into our final segment today of Matt Connerton Unleashed. And we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also on Comcast 97 if you're in Manchester. And hello to all of our online listeners across the nation and around the globe. You can go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all your live streaming options, social media links, contact info, show archives, etc., etc. Today is Thursday, July 13, 2023. So nice to have you all with me. By the way, that song I played is a live performance of If You Don't Go from the band Satellite Union. And tomorrow on the show, in the second hour, my friend Dave Wally will be Skyping in all the way from the Windy City, Chicago, to talk about the band. And Dave and I will get caught up. We're old friends. I actually went to high school with Dave, so I'm really looking forward to this. Dave's a great guy and enormously talented. And he sent me some tracks for tomorrow, but I found that live performance online of that song, and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to play that today, kind of give everybody a little sneak peek. So that'll be tomorrow on the show. And of course, we also have tomorrow, because it will be Friday, Eric Pilcher's classic film review. And this week, the subject is National Lampoon's Vacation. So that will be tomorrow as well. So we have a busy show tomorrow. But if you'd like to join us today, 603-250-6007 is the studio line, 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617. See, I screwed myself up. Wow, I never do that. 617-917-4476. I never screw up the phone number. 617-917-4476. I'm all worried about this whole Cuba stuff. I'm distracted. Let's see. I'm on social media at Matt Connerton. You can email me, matt@mattconnerton.com. And of course, you can interact and opine in the Facebook live chat. But the best thing to do so that we can hear and enjoy your dulcet tones is to give us a call at 603-250-6007. By the way, speaking of the Facebook live chat, I see a new name in there. Louis Tivey joins us in the chat. Hello. Just to follow up. Oh, and Joe Friday joins us and says, aloha, peeps. Aloha to you, Joe Friday. Ron had asked some questions during his when he called in earlier regarding Japan. Mike from Queen City Cabinetry said in the chat room, I think it was either we were sending troops there to train their troops, or we are having our troops there. Yeah, we you don't hear Japan come up a lot in foreign policy discussions, but I do know that Japan gets very nervous about, and we're not going to get into this today in detail. We won't have time, but North Korea, of course, constantly saber rattling every now and again. And sometimes I get concerned that it's becoming increasingly common, these test launches of missiles and shooting them right over Japan. And, you know, Kim Jong-un, we have to figure out how to contain him and control him. And that can just keeps getting kicked down the road, doesn't it? But yeah, so Japan is always very nervous. Another thing that Ron had asked about, by the way, was what Dave Ridley was saying about guns. No, you did not misunderstand him, Ron. What the argument that Dave was making, and this is something that you often hear. You'll hear Second Amendment activists say this, and you know, and I'm a pro Second Amendment guy. That's an issue where I tend to be more conservative. But of course, we live in New Hampshire, where here in New Hampshire, we're one of the most heavily armed states in the entire country, but we're also one of the safest, interestingly enough. But you'll often hear activists say that part of the reason why the United States never gets invaded is because so many people here have guns. So if anyone tried to invade the United States, there would be somebody hiding behind every bush with a gun waiting to shoot them. Now, the context that Dave Ridley was bringing that up in, though, I thought was a little, again, I had to push back on it a little bit because I understood what he was saying. I understood his point, but, and it's not that he's wrong from a logical standpoint. Of course, it would be difficult to invade the United States because not only do we have the largest military in the world, exponentially larger than any other military, certainly with what we spend on it, but we are also such a heavily armed populace. But the thing is, even with us being so heavily armed as individuals, gun owners in the United States, we still have the largest military in the entire world. No one is ever going to invade us, regardless of whether the citizenry is armed or not. Joe Friday says, shout out to firefighters, police, and first responders. God bless them. Be safe. So I think that answers Ron's question. Oh, no, I'm sorry. So the other thing, that's right. There was another thing Ron brought up, and he makes a good point. Does it really matter if the Chinese do establish a base on Cuba, because we have bases all over the world and we have the military capability to shoot anything down, defuse any situation, etc. In other words, even if they do have a base in Cuba, is that really a threat to us? Now, my response to that would be whether it is a direct threat or not. First of all, I think it could be, but I'll circle back to that. The broader point that I would make about that, and this is kind of the underlining point of what I've been talking about today in terms of Cuba and their ever-growing relationship with China, and of course the rekindling to an extent of their relationship with Russia. The broader point is that we don't need our enemies being able to set up shop and spy on us or establish themselves in any way militarily 100 miles off the coast of Florida. Even if what happens there and what is established there is not necessarily a threat, in the sense that it's not anything that we can't handle. It certainly doesn't feel very good. And I think it would be destabilizing. Sorry, I just got a weird pop-up on my computer that distracted me. But going back to, would it be a direct threat? Well, what if the Chinese, they have nuclear weapons. What if the Chinese, in the course of setting up their base there, they put nuclear missiles there, a la the Cuban Missile Crisis and what we had to deal with Russia? Now, that is a direct threat. The whole reason in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, why that was so harrowing and so dangerous, and again, as I talked about in the first hour of the show, thank God we had a president at the time, JFK, who was able to, shepherd and steward us through that terrible time. I mean, I say us as in America. I wasn't here yet. And like I said, I'm glad I wasn't. I'm glad I wasn't alive for that, because that would have been terrifying. So I'm glad that, and if you talk to somebody who does remember it, they'll tell you it was pretty scary, because at any given moment, they knew it could be the end. But the reason that was so massively destabilizing was because that gave the Russians first strike capability, to the extent that first strike capability matters in the terms of global thermonuclear war. If nuclear war breaks out, it'll ultimately, even if you're not in a blast zone, there's going to be radiation, and there's going to be a nuclear winter that will kill everyone on the planet anyway. So it almost doesn't matter who has first strike capability. But if you've got nuclear missiles 100 miles off the coast of Florida, you can probably get those in the air pretty quickly and hitting the United States before we have any chance to respond. And that's scary to think about. So it does matter in the sense that, look, and I'm not naive. I understand that even if there is not a military base near the United States that is occupied by a foreign power, there are nuclear submarines that can launch missiles, that can sail up nice and close. Not sail. What do you call it? Sailing. You don't sail underwater. But anyway, they can get in there. You can get in with a nuclear submarine, probably largely undetected, and you can launch something right off the coast and hit us. I understand that. I'm not naive to it. But again, the idea of the Chinese having a base, because once that military base is expanded, remember, when the Russians first started they hadn't become operational yet. Okay, they had to set them up. And I'm sure the technology has changed over the decades. But when the United States first detected that there were Russian missiles on the island of Cuba via that aerial photography, it's not like we knew. I mean, obviously we knew that the Russians were bringing something to Cuba. Anyone could see those ships. But we didn't know what was on those ships. And, it could have been anything. Could have been food, grain for food, could have been anything, right? We didn't know they were missiles until they were spotted from the air. Now you could see it with a satellite. I think we had satellite technology then too, but not like now. But there were flyovers that were done by the military that were able to take those pictures. And then those pictures were, those were clearly missiles. Again, they weren't operational yet. And then it became a race against time. Well, what do we do? Do we go and bomb Cuba and bomb those missiles where those missiles are and wind up killing a whole lot of Russians in the process? Do we do that? Because those missiles were going to become operational. And by the way, that timetable kept getting moved up, where, JFK was told, okay, well, we've only got so many days until those missiles are operational. And then it became actually probably within the next 48 hours, those missiles are going to become operational. And thank God, were not for the back channel communication that was happening, thank God Khrushchev backed down, and that was the end of that. In exchange for the Jupiter missiles that were in Turkey at the time, I think that we had there. Those were actually scheduled to be decommissioned anyway because they were outdated. So they needed to be taken down and disassembled. But the Russians didn't know that. So that was something that JFK could offer to Khrushchev. We'll take those missiles out that you don't like sitting there on your doorstep in exchange for you taking your missiles out of Cuba before they even become operational. And that's ultimately what happened. But yeah, the idea of the Chinese having a base on the island of Cuba, again, 100 miles off the coast of Florida, is unacceptable. And we cannot have that. Lots of comments in the Facebook live chat. So I do want to get to some of these. Crispy says, China needs us and we need China, but NATO now outguns everybody. China needs us and we need China, referring to, of course, as Dave and I were talking about, the interdependence economically. We are quite intertwined, and which I hope will ultimately prevent war. And Saturn says, we hashtag Matt Connerton. We have to take a shower, and so enjoy your afternoon show. Thank you, N Saturn. You enjoy your shower. Crispy says, sorry, but guns are nothing compared to bombs, and China can't afford to attack us, and we can't afford to attack China, but we do need to protect Taiwan at all costs. After all, a bully regime won't be stopped until they are stopped. Yeah, and that is something that we've talked about on the show too. I had some criticism of President Biden when he said flatly that, yes, we would defend Taiwan when he was asked, this was months ago, when he was asked if China were to move on Taiwan, would we defend Taiwan? And Biden said yes. I'm personally a big fan of strategic ambiguity. Although I also found it fascinating that in that moment, when people were kind of pulling their hair out saying, wow, I can't believe Biden just discarded strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity, of course, being where you keep your opponent off balance by not letting them know exactly, by not telegraphing or saying outright exactly how you might respond to whatever move that they make. It's a bit of a chess game. It all is, right, in terms of foreign policy, and you don't want your opponent to know what your move will be in response to their move if you can help it. And I had some criticism of Biden for that, but it was interesting how when everybody was so upset, everybody just kind of collectively forgot that George W. Bush had done the exact same thing. When George W. Bush became president, it was very early in his presidency, so early, I believe it was before 9/11 happened. It was within that first 8 months. He was asked almost the exact same scenario. He was asked by somebody, what will you do? What will the response be if China were to attack Taiwan? Will you defend Taiwan? And he said yes. And same thing. People went nuts. Well, what about strategic ambiguity? He just went and said it out loud. You can't do that. But so it had already been done by a previous administration. Strangely enough, I thought Trump recently in an interview, was it with Bret Baier? That interview with Bret Baier, I thought was disastrous for Trump in a lot of ways legally. But one thing I did give Trump credit for, I thought he gave a smart answer. And you won't hear, look, the list of things that I give Trump credit for, and if you're a regular listener, you know how I feel about Donald Trump, it's a short list. But I did think he something really smart that he said during that interview was when Bret Baier asked him about what would your policy be on if China were to move on Taiwan, Trump said, well, I'm not going to answer that, but Xi Jinping, he knows what I would do. I thought that was a smart, because that is strategic ambiguity. I'm not going to answer that hypothetical, but he knows what I would do. So it's strategic ambiguity, but with a little bit of a threat underneath. I thought that was smart, uncharacteristically so. Let's see. Oh my goodness. Scott Robinson said in the chat room. Now this is in response to what Rhonda said about Dave Ridley sounds like Dick Cavett, which I'd never noticed before. But Scott Robinson said the difference being with Dick Cavett didn't hate America. Well, I don't think Dave Ridley hates America. But he does want to leave America. He wants, for newer listeners who don't know, the reason Dave Ridley mentioned NH Exit, or maybe I mentioned it, he was shy about plugging anything today. Dave Ridley's part of a secessionist movement called NH Exit, and they want to secede from the United States and have New Hampshire be its own country. But I don't think he hates America. I wouldn't characterize it quite that way. Crispy points out U.S. dollar is strongest dollar than any other country. That is true. Crispy also points out our nuke submarines are everywhere. That is also true. And I think that goes to Ron's point. Joe Friday says, bad guys will get weapons. Responsible weapon owners don't need to secure them. Don't leave them in an unlocked car or a closet. Absolutely. We only have a little bit of time left, but if you'd like to get in with a quick call, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. I did want to go through this timeline just quickly. This is from CFR.org. This timeline of our relationship with Cuba, which has been the subject today on the show. But we're going to pick it up at 1959. And we're going to try to get all the way into the present day with this time permitting. So in 1959, there was growing antagonism. Castro nationalizes all foreign assets in Cuba, hikes taxes on U.S. imports, and establishes trade deal with the Soviet Union. So this is prior to, just a couple of years prior to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So Castro's getting cozy with Cuba and antagonistic toward the United States. We're going to kind of speed through this, so I'm going to leave a lot of this out. But 1961, of course, the Bay of Pigs invasion, executing a plan developed and approved by the Eisenhower administration. JFK deploys a brigade of 1,400 CIA-sponsored Cuban exiles to overthrow Fidel Castro. The Cuban military defeats the force within 3 days after several mishaps, disadvantage the invaders, and reveal U.S. involvement. Despite the failed invasion, U.S. administrations over the next several decades conduct covert operations against Cuba. Okay, here we go. The main event. Or at least we're getting to it. Okay, so 1962, in February of 62, the Kennedy administration imposes an embargo on Cuba that prohibits all trade. Cuba, whose economy greatly depended on trade with the U.S., loses approximately $130 billion over the next 60 years, according to Cuban government and UN estimates. All right, here it is. The Cuban Missile Crisis from October 14 to October 28. This is the big one. This is, again, to me, this is the single most fascinating moment in American history and also the most terrifying. U.S. spy satellites discover that Cuba has allowed the Soviet Union to build nuclear missile bases on the island. In response, Kennedy demands the Soviet weapons be removed and orders a naval quarantine of Cuba, igniting a 13-day standoff. By the way, they were very careful to call it a quarantine and not a blockade, even though it really was a blockade. But a blockade is considered an act of war. So they were very careful, a little semantic game, but they called it a quarantine for that reason. With the threat of nuclear war on the horizon, the U.S. negotiates with Russia via back channels. As the crisis nears its third week, Kennedy secretly agrees to withdraw U.S. nuclear missiles from Turkey within a few months if the Soviet Union withdraws its missiles from Cuba. And again, those missiles were outdated anyways, and they were already scheduled to be decommissioned. But Khrushchev didn't know that, didn't need to know that. Kennedy also pledges not to invade Cuba. Soviet Premier Nikita... By the way, and the reason that he needed to say that was because of the Bay of Pigs. Had the Bay of Pigs not happened, maybe there would never have been any paranoia regardless. Okay, so Nikita Khrushchev accepts the deal and announces that he will order the missiles removed. The following July, Kennedy prohibits U.S. nationals from traveling to Cuba. So we're going to kind of skip forward here. There was a little bit of diplomacy here and there. But in March of 1982, U.S. labels Cuba a terrorism sponsor. 1992, U.S. tightens sanctions after Soviet collapse. I'm skipping ahead because we're so low on time. We're going to go all the... Oh, remember the 1999? Wow, that was all the way back then. The Elian Gonzalez controversy. I always thought they shouldn't have sent him back. They took him to Disney World. How could they send him back after taking him to Disney World? Okay, we're going to skip all the way forward to the Obama administration. Okay, so December of 2014, a move to restore diplomatic ties. Barack Obama and Raul Castro announced they will restore full diplomatic ties following the exchange of a jailed U.S. intelligence officer for the 3 remaining Cuban 5 prisoners. All right, so that was the beginning of that. And in 2015, Cuba was removed from the terrorism list. In 2015, July of that year, U.S. and Cuba reopened embassies. In 2016, in March of 2016, Obama makes a historic visit to Cuba. In November, Fidel Castro dies, but Raul was already running things because Fidel was in poor health. And then Trump came in, and in June of 2017, Trump reinstated travel and business restrictions. And in September of 2017, U.S. cuts embassy staff in Cuba. This is what I was talking about at the top of the show. There was a lot of work done during the Obama administration to reestablish diplomatic ties and try to normalize things. And Trump came in and they dismantled all of that. And then Biden came in and, made a pretty meager attempt at reestablishing some of it, but really didn't do much. In May of 2022, Biden eased Trump-era sanctions, but that's about it. So the point of all that, and again, it was a long way to get there, I know, because I started this all the way at the beginning of the show today. But I go back to my original point, and if you've hung in with me for the whole thing, I appreciate it. But my original point was, we're at a point now where we're worried about Cuba, their growing relationship with China, and their sort of a reestablishment of a strong relationship with Russia. Cuba, this island that is 100 miles off the coast of Florida, and this is strategically very bad for us. And this is being not covered enough in the media, in my opinion. It is getting mainstream media coverage, but not enough. This is an important moment in this whole, as we continue to have problems with our 2 greatest adversaries currently in the world, Russia and China. And we've got this island of Cuba who, during the Obama administration, made a good faith attempt and made some real progress in terms of reestablishing our relationship with Cuba in a very positive way. Trump administration came in and dismantled that. Biden administration came in, failed to reestablish most of what Obama had done. And so there's blame to go around. I blame both the Trump and the Biden administrations for the fact that now, again, without us having a positive strategic relationship with Cuba, of course, our adversaries fill that vacuum. And we didn't even get to a lot of what Russia's doing right now. We talked a lot about China. We didn't even get to what Russia's doing with Cuba. And it's, we did a little bit, but, in terms of supplying them oil and so forth, because Cuba's having a rough time right now. Cuba's having a very difficult time. They're having their own energy crisis. Maybe we could have helped with that. And had a good strategic relationship with that little island that sits 100 miles off the coast of Florida. But no, we let somebody else do that. And I think that this is a very dangerous moment. And it's probably too late for us to do anything about it now in terms of Cuba. But none of this had to happen is my point. And I blame both the current administration and the previous administration for allowing this to happen. And it didn't have to be this way. That's my view of it. All right, we are out of time. Don't forget, tomorrow, we got a big show tomorrow, of course. We have Eric Pilcher's classic film review, National Lampoon's Vacation, the original vacation film. And then in the second hour tomorrow, we have Dave Wally from the band Satellite Union Skyping in from Chicago. Really looking forward to that. And if you miss any part of today's show, it'll be up in just a little bit at WMNHradio.org. And at my website, mattconnerton.com. And thank you to Dave Ridley and Ron, of course, both for calling in, and everybody in the chat room. And Easy G, if you're listening, I hope everything is okay. He might be taking another break. There was no entertainment report today, and I haven't heard from him. So hopefully he's all right. Hopefully all is well. But that's going to do it for us for now. I'll leave you with a little more Satellite Union, a little more of a preview for tomorrow's show. Really looking forward to that. And I'll talk to y'all a little bit later. Oh, and if you're listening live on Thursday, coming up next immediately after this show, Through the Stage Door, hosted by the great Rob Dion. All right, I'm out of here. Bye, everybody.